Yeah. Hey, Susie. I think you're the only one. We've had some technical difficulty here, so as we're getting ready, I'm going to do a 1, 2, 3 test with you, Susie. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, everything's good? All right.
I don't hear her. I'll see if I put you on live. I don't see the chat.
So do you have?
Yep, Susie says yes.
Okay. How do you get in the chat?
I don't know. It gave me the same screen as you, and it's just pulling her up.
All right, now I see me. That's frightening.
Yep, Susie says yes.
Okay. How do you get in the chat?
I can't have you live and get the chat.
Okay, so I'm just gonna come off and let you
Okay,
take
that's
the.
fine. Yep, I'll
yeah.
make sure that it stays on.
All right, and then I guess we will, how many, we have a couple of people that have joined, right?
I'm gonna have her do words.
Oh, sure,
Just a
absolutely.
surprise.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is on there. Paula's there. Paula says hi.
Hi, Paula. Let me move this over. Should have gotten more coffee.
You need coffee?
There's
Susie says,
just
Debbie,
a pop back there?
hi Debbie.
Hey,
Cool.
Susie, what are you putting it?
Just
Just
put the
Phyllis.
black,
Nice
yeah,
to
that'd be
see you.
excellent.
Good to see her.
All right, well, it really is kind of time. We're getting
Yep,
a
so-
couple of people, right?
Yep, Paula says hi,
Good.
and Susie.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to Epiphany Lutheran Church and School here in Lake Worth, Florida. Yeah, and it's Thursday night, and it's really just a real blessing to be in God's house. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be here. I know that we all miss it very much, but I can assure you all that God is with us. He hasn't forgotten us. He's with you every moment of every day and every moment of every night, and he never abandons you, and he never forgets you. He is with you. So be uplifted by that news. And count your blessings. I know it's kind of difficult to do in these times with all that's going on around us, but truly, we are so very blessed here. I mean, we actually have homes to quarantine in. You know, that's pretty cool, actually. And we're all doing that COVID-15, you know, gaining those extra 15 pounds as we attack the refrigerator several times a day. Thank you very much,
You're
Debbie.
very welcome.
Appreciate that. So I am here tonight with Carolyn, who will be fielding your questions if you have any. And I encourage you to do so. This is not a lecture, it's an interactive time. I appreciate feedback. Makes me know you're not sleeping. And Debbie's with us too, which is really cool. Welcome, Debbie. It's great to see you. Now, I think we ought to open with a prayer, and then we'll get started. So, Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this house of worship, for your word, and for the comfort and the joy and the wisdom that your word brings to each one of our lives when we have trust and faith in your Son, Jesus Christ, Father. I pray, Lord, that you will make your presence known tonight to all those that are tuning in, and that you will use this evening to impart to each of us whatever it is that we so very much need. And you do know our wants and our needs far in advance of us. Specific prayers tonight, shout out to Jill for employment, for Frank for healing, for my wife Darlene. I pray that the pain in her shoulder will subside and disappear. I pray for Amise, who's just undergone her first round of dialysis today. Father, I do pray also for David, that he may be safe in his isolation. And I just pray for all those that are with us right now, that we all may be protected from this storm, and that we will be given the opportunities to preach the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ to those around us. Also want to shout out to Carl and Susie, as well, as Carl continues to heal. I pray this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, so we're in Genesis, and since I have a captive audience here, settle back, grab your popcorn, your drink. There will be no potty breaks. Okay, so I'm gonna torture you a little bit by just a brief recap, since it's been a while since we've been together. We are looking at Genesis and Revelations, the two bookends of God's Word. Are just fabulous books, but they have so much in common, and they complete just such a perfect circle. I want to take a couple minutes to kind of go through what some of those similarities are. So Genesis and Revelation are both about a creation. So Genesis is about the perfect creation of the world and everything in the world, including man, in the image of God. And in Revelation, it's about the creation of a new Jerusalem after the end of the world. So there's creation on both sides of the books. You also have a real line in the fact that you've got tribulation in both of the books. You've got the 12 plagues of Egypt in the Exodus, and you have the 21 plagues of God's wrath pouring out upon the earth during the tribulation in Genesis. So a lot of similarities there as well, that tie back to a connection, if you will. Also, if you look at Genesis, it was written by Moses at the end of his life. It was the first book of the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and Revelation was written by the Apostle John at the end of his life. So they were both written at the very end of very holy men's lives. So a lot of similarities. They're both very complicated books. There are 2 accounts of creation in Genesis. There are 2 accounts of the end times in Revelation. It just goes on and on. So it's always interesting to see how God's Word ties together over time and space to fulfill His covenants. And I just found it astounding. They're both difficult books too. I would never suggest to a new believer that they start off in either one of these 2 books, because there's so much going on, and it can be so confusing that it's not really the recommended way to go when you're just starting out on your journey with Christ. But once you're a little more advanced, it is in fact really astounding and really something else to take a look at these things. So that's kind of the overview of the 2 books and Genesis itself. We're going to go back a little bit. I'm going to start with the flood in chapter 6 tonight. And the reason that I'm doing that is in honor of the weather that we're about to get. And also, I'm not really sure where I am, since Bob Lawson isn't here to tell me.
Well,
So
you just said page 25, chapter 31, question mark?
well, I am actually in my mother's new NIV. So I don't have this book. So we'll start with the flood, because I think it's a pretty amazing account. If there are any questions as we go along, jump in, okay? All right. I feel like a short man sitting here. We go for a little coffee.
Increasing corruption on earth, is that the flood? Okay.
This is the flood.
Yep.
So this is chapter 6, the flood. When men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal, and his days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old men of renown. So interesting words for sure. The Nephilim were thought to be the offspring of angels that had relations with mortal women, and their offspring were considered to be giants, and were actually an affront to God. During this time, before the flood, the world was really dark. Most people lived 500-600 years. The longest living man, Methuselah, lived 928 years. Actually, when Noah launched in the ark, he was 600 years old. It took him 100 years to build it. He started at age 500. It took him 100 years, and he launched when he was 600 years old. And during the time of Noah, when Noah's grandfather was still walking the earth, Adam was still walking the earth. Adam lived over 900 years. So you can imagine how different the world looked then. And it was a very dark place because we had much more time to proliferate evil and to push the idea of us as God instead of God as God, and God had enough of it. So one of the things that went away after the flood, obviously, was the Nephilim. That was no longer there. So the Nephilim were on the earth. This is verse 4. In those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them, they were heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. So it was just black. I mean, it was just a really, I guess it was as close to hell on earth as you can get, hell being the absence of God. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind from whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So that's a really interesting couple of paragraphs there, because you don't think of God as having any remorse or looking upon his creation and thinking that it just wasn't something that he should have done. Yes, definitely.
Why the animals and the birds as well?
Because that's a great question. Because when Adam and Eve left the garden, or were thrown out of the garden by God, all of creation was broken, not just man and woman. And that's a really interesting point, because a lot of people will justify their actions in the fact that it's natural. Well, what's really natural to us is not necessarily righteous. What's natural to us is a broken world, a broken creation, broken desires, broken emotional states, etc. These things were not intended for us to bear, or to have a burden of anxiety or doubt or fear. Those things came after we were expelled from the garden, after we learned what evil was. And brought it into the world. So the whole of creation is broken. It's not just us. So that meaning that everything's got to go. But again, back to that whole piece of, well, how could God make a mistake? Or was it a mistake? And especially when you see him as omnipresent. I mean, he's in both the past, future, and present simultaneously. So he sees all. So he knew that this was going to take place before he even created the world, and yet he created it. So, that begs the whole idea of are we predestined? Is it predestined to happen? And the answer to that is No, nothing's predestined necessarily, but God knows the future, so therefore, he understands where we're going to be. We make those choices with our free will, but the reality is that God himself knows all, so he knows exactly how it's going to turn out. And he has a plan, right? And that plan is far bigger than anything that you and I are going to understand or be able to actually experience until we are with him and share paradise with him in heaven. So he is displeased. He wants to start again in a sense. What I find really interesting is the last sentence, which says, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Noah too is a broken man. He's sinful, mortal too, right? So God is choosing to start over with a broken man. So he's not wiping it all off the board. He starts over with a broken man. And we see this trend throughout the Old Testament. He'll wipe out the 12 tribes of Israel. The Assyrians wiped them out. The Babylonians wiped them out. They were held in captivity in Egypt for 600 years. But he doesn't allow them all to be wiped out. He reestablishes them. He, if you will, he saves them, right? And he does that because he loves us. So yes, there are consequences for our actions, but on the other side, God very much loves us because he allows us to continue, right? But there are consequences for the things that we do, and the world was so black that the consequence was huge, okay? So Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. When I look at this next paragraph, which is a really detailed description of how the ark was assembled, I can't help but think about Moses at Mount Horeb when he got the New Testament, the 10 Commandments, and then the instructions on how to assemble the tent of worship, or the first mobile synagogue, how detailed it is. This is very similar in that detail. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Make a roof for it and finish the ark to within 18 inches of the top. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I'm going to bring flood waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens. Every creature that has the breath of life in it, everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 every kind of bird, every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you and be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. Noah did everything just as God commanded, and it took him 100 years.
Kyle says the Ark of the Covenant.
Excuse me?
Kyle said the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know what he's saying on here, but.
Oh, well, the Ark of the Covenant is a totally different piece. I don't know. Kyle, you're going to have to elaborate on that one.
And Mary Lou's on the line now too.
Hi, Mary Lou. How are you? So 100 years, can you imagine, if you will, just kind of put yourself there. So here's this guy. It's profound evil all around them, very intense, such that God had enough. And he's proclaiming that he's going to build an ark because there's going to be a flood that's going to destroy everybody. And as God often does, it doesn't happen right away. It takes 100 years. So for 100 years, this guy is probably mocked and laughed at, and as he's building this monstrous ship. And I'm sure he was laughed at even when it began to rain, because rain is rain, right? And until the floodwaters from the earth itself and the heavens above, everything opened up. People probably thought he was mad. So that's a good lesson for us, because as people may look to us and say, you guys are nuts for what you believe and how you trust and the faith that you have. How can you possibly believe in something that you can't see or feel? No five senses can indicate that it's there. You're crazy. But the reality is, it's crazy not to. You find real peace, real joy in a relationship with Jesus Christ and God the Father, as opposed to the things of this world, which, whether you believe or you don't believe, we all know that the things of this world are temporary. That the satisfactions we get when we buy something new, or we lose that weight, or we get that job, or whatever, we win that lottery, whatever it may be, it's fleeting. It comes and it goes, and you're on to the next, you know? So when you establish a relationship with Christ, it's forever. It's forever. Walking with him and obeying his commandments, which are meant to bless, not curse us, by the way. It offers us just an incredible sense of peace and joy that's lasting. It doesn't expire. There's no expiration date on it. It doesn't gather dust. It's really something else. Yes.
Kyle says the instructions to build this ark and then Exodus 37 were the instructions to build the Ark of the Covenant.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, Kyle, I got you. Now go somewhere. All right. Yeah, right. So here is Noah building this tremendous ark and suffering the slings and arrows of his compadres of the time, and but having the faith to do so. That's faith, right? So chapter 7, the Lord then said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 2 of every kind of unclean animal. The reason that the clean animals are coming along in groups of 7 is because they use them for sacrificial reasons. They use them for sacrificial reasons, because before the flood, we are vegetarians. After the flood, we actually begin to eat meat. So that's a fact. We were meant to eat from the fruit and seeds of the earth and not from our animal friends. Animals actually, before the flood, were not afraid of man. They were part of our everyday life in terms of they had no fear. Fear was instilled into them after the flood. And of course it would be, because now we were able to capture and eat them. So yeah, probably so. And also 7 of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now, I will send rain and on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth. 600 years old. It's interesting to note that, it's not just rain that that sprang forth and covered the earth. It's also waters from the depths, from within the earth. Of all the water on the planet, only 1% is actually fresh water. And of that, only 1% is actually attainable in rivers and streams and from rain, etc. The rest is under the earth's crust. So when this deluge took place, not only did it rain for 40 days, but all the water that was captive under the earth bubbled up or sprang up and flooded the earth as well. So it must have been just horrific and fairly instantaneous. Noah's 600 years old. He takes off, casts off. He and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the flood waters came on the earth. That had to be the stuff of nightmares. When they're locked up in this ark, and when the damned realize what's happening, they must have been just attacking the ark, banging, crashing into, trying to gain access in any way, shape, or form. It must have been a horrific scene right up to the last. But that's what happened. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. On that very day, Noah and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered into the ark. They had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind. Everything with wings, pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them, came to Noah and entered into the ark. The animals going in were male and female of every living thing, as God had commanded Noah. Then the Lord shut them in. It's kind of wild too. I mean, you think about what that means. And we were talking about Revelation earlier. You know, God sends his prophets, he sends warnings, he sends tribulations upon the earth so that men will turn back to him and repent from their sins and accept him as their God. And when they don't, there is a time when the door is closed. The end is done. I mean, he shuts us in. It's over with. There's no turning back. That's why there's such an urge and urgency in spreading the news, the good news of the Gospels to everybody that's willing to listen. Because quite frankly, there'll come a time when they won't have that opportunity anymore. We don't know when that's going to be. We have no idea. So we want to be prepared as best as we can. All right, so they're locked up into the ark. For 40 days, a flood kept coming on the earth as the waters increased. They lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and on all the high mountains under the entire heavens was covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 20 feet. So the highest mountaintop, I don't know exactly what that is, but the highest mountaintop was at least 20 feet under the bottom of the ark, or the top of the water. It's pretty unbelievable. That's a lot of water. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind, everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils, died. That's huge. That's huge. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. Men and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds of the air were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. So 150 days the ark is floating around, and that's it. There's 7 humans left with the animals that were housed in the ark, and that's it.
What's the purpose of that? The 150 days? I mean, obviously after 40 days of rain.
I don't think there's any symbolism in there. I don't think that that's necessary. It's just an accounting of what it is. We're talking about half a year that the waters were sustained upon the earth. That's a long time. I mean, we're complaining with quarantine for the last, 3 months, 2.5 months? You know, imagine 6 months with a bunch of farm animals. That would be bad. But that's the way it was, and that's what took place. So, chapter 8, but God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the water had gone down. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountain of Ararat. The waters continued to recede until the 10th month. And on the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains became visible. And so they're going to reestablish themselves here. After 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the ark, window, wow, and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. But the dove could find no place to set its feet, because there was water over all the surface of the earth. So it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. He waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again, but this time it did not return to him. 7, that's the number of perfection. So there's a lot of 7s in here for sure. By the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water had dried up from the earth. And Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the 2nd month, the earth was completely dry. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and your wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number upon it." So Noah came out together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground, and all the birds, everything that moves on the earth came out of the ark, one kind after another. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood." It's important, right? That is sin that we're born with, right? All of us, every single one of us from birth has sin within us. And never again shall I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. God's covenant with Noah. Chapter 9, then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall upon all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the air, upon every creature that moves along the ground, and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Now, that's meaning that before the flood, they were not afraid of us. But after the flood, they certainly were. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Aha, the reason for the fear. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood, I will surely demand an accounting. This goes back to Cain and Abel, right? Murder is not acceptable. Taking the life of a brother or a sister is not acceptable. That lifeblood, you're not to eat of any animal. I guess maybe sushi's out of the question. I don't like sushi, so that's okay.
Mary Moore just.
Oh, hi, Mary Moore. I will demand an accounting for every animal, and from each man too, I will demand an accounting for the life of his fellow man. So you will be judged. If you take the life of another, you're going to be judged by God. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made man. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number, multiply on the earth and increase upon it. The Lord said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals. All those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth, I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is a sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth. Okay, so the next chapter, it's not chapter, but the next part of this is about the sons of Noah. So Carolyn's going to read that. Seriously?
I can read it.
Wow, it's
You keep an eye on that.
yeah, okay. It's got a lot of names in it and stuff,
Oh.
so you know, a lot of really tough ones.
Sweet, thank
We
you.
actually don't have to necessarily go through all of the names.
I thought you were actually reading quite nicely.
Well, yeah, but not when it comes to the names. Let it be known it's important, right, to have the names because that's an accounting of the lineage leading to Christ, actually. So parts of this are very important as man starts to populate the earth, where this beginning comes from. So with that said, there are a lot of names in here, and I'm not going to read them all because it would be awful. But I will read some. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark are Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Oh, you want you want that back?
No, I'll take my phone back.
All right. You're really messing me up here. You know?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The sons of Noah who came out of the ark are Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These were the three sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the earth. So we're all descended in some way from them. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backwards and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so they would not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend the territory of Japheth. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his slave." So this is a really important passage because for a very long period of time, this passage was used to justify slavery. It was thought that this is the beginning of the curse that was put upon people of color in order to serve their brothers in a capacity of slavery, which it is not intended to be whatsoever. It has nothing to do with that. But yet, if you take it out of context and just look at one or two verses in the Bible, you can twist them any way that you want necessarily. Remember that this isn't God saying, "Hey, this is what you need. This is what's going to be happening," or "By my authority, this is going to happen." This was of men, and it was a curse upon a son of Noah's for his indiscretion and to the generations that followed that son. But it wasn't intended to serve as justification for one man to own another. Never was. Never was. Okay. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Altogether, Noah lived 950 years, and then he died. 950 years, that's a long, long time. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. Now we get into all the naming conventions of the sons of Noah's sons. So I'm not going to read all of this, but it certainly does lay out the lineage. Okay, so we're going to move on to chapter 11, which is the Tower of Babel. Debbie's sitting over here laughing at me, so I feel right at home. Okay, we're going to move on to the Tower of Babel, 11. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Therein lies the problem. This is why the Tower of Babel is in the Old Testament, because the endeavor of man was to make a name for ourselves. So we are again trying to establish ourselves as our own gods, and putting aside the relationship with our Holy Father who created us. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that men had been building, and the Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So he interceded when we got too big for our britches. He tends to do that when we try to assert ourselves in a way that approaches upon the divine, if you will. He will, in fact, intercede on his behalf. From Shem to Abram. This is the account of Shem. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. And after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. So he's living, Shem is out there for 600 plus years. When Arphaxad had lived 35 years, which is, just barely out of diapers, I would think, he became the father of Shelah. And after he became the father of Shelah, Arphaxad lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. Amazing. I don't know what they were eating, but it must have been pretty darn healthy.
When did they start to only live like 120?
So God, after the flood, commanded that they would not live beyond 120 years, but in God's way, it doesn't happen all at once, right? So you'll see that the accounts of men and their lifespans begins to fall down, right? Doesn't happen immediately. It goes from 900 years to 500 years, 300 years to 200 years, and then 120 years or 100 years. So it doesn't happen all at once. It's, that's again, one of the marvels of God. He doesn't necessarily work according to what we believe is the right time frame, meaning now. He'll do it over his time frame, right? So when Shelah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Eber. And after he became the father of Eber, Shelah lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he became the father of Peleg. And after he became the father of Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and had other sons and daughters. And it goes on and on like this, for quite a while. And we do see the numbers dropping, when we come down to Nahor, who lived 29 years. He became the father of Terah. After he became the father of Terah, he lived 119 years. So again, we're seeing this limitation on the lifespan of man. So we're going to go to 12, the call of Abram, which I love. I love Abram, who is going to be eventually Abraham, of course. And this is the beginning and establishment of the 12 tribes of Israel, the Jewish nation. The call of Abram, chapter 12. The Lord had said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Okay, so that's pretty simple little paragraph there. You're thinking he called Allied or, World Moving Company, and they came, picked them up and moved the stuff. No. He's moving an entire town. His family, an extended family, and servants, maidservants, female servants, his cattle. We're talking about quite a long procession of people, and he's just going off. It's like someone saying, pick up your stuff. Don't worry. In fact, don't even pick it up. Just go. Don't worry about don't worry. Just go on out there and start walking. Okay, sure. And that is faith. You can see why the Jewish people believed that Abraham was a pillar of faith. And yet he really had his doubts too, which we're going to look at.
So he was told to go by himself?
No, he was told to take all of his household.
So,
Everybody goes.
okay, I'm reading it wrong.
Yep.
Here it says, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house. So leave all that to the land that I showed you.
Leave your country, your people, and your father's household and go into the land I will show you. So he's taking his entire group. Okay. I will make you into a great nation. This is the establishment of the Abrahamic covenant. Okay, this is the second covenant. I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's quite a covenant. So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran, and he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and then they arrived there. Canaan was a hostile territory, by the way. This was and is the promised land to be that they populate, but they are in a land that believes and worships idols. These are pagans that surround them. They're not in their home territory at whatsoever. Okay, so it's hostile. Abraham traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. He's speaking of the 12 tribes of Israel as they are brought out of bondage by Moses and cross over the Jordan River to establish themselves in this promised land. Many generations to come. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward Negev. So certainly a lot of wandering. It kind of reminds me of the 40 days that the 12 tribes wandered in the desert based on faith. God provided for them there, but they were in the desert. And here we have Abram trekking out into hostile territory based on faith, based on what he heard as a command from God. So Abram in Egypt. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. You know, it's always good to start off with a compliment, guys. I'm just saying, Abram obviously knows what he's doing. So he says, I know you're a beautiful woman and how beautiful you are. When the Egyptians see you, they're going to say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake and my life will be spared because of you. I love this. And the reason I love this is because I'm in good company. Here we have Abram, which is a foundation and the cornerstone of the Jewish religion as the go-to faithful man, and yet he's got his doubts and he bends the rules too. Now the reality is that he is in fact related to Sarai. They're distant cousins, but Arkansas had nothing. No, one side that's a bad thing. At any rate, it was acceptable in those days. So he bent the truth. He wasn't necessarily lying outright, but still not right. So when Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that she was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. Wow. That Pharaoh, I'll tell you, he treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle and male and female donkeys, men servants and maid servants and camels. She was beautiful, but the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So he's not punishing Abram, but he's certainly punishing the Egyptians. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Right? He's the one that lied, and yet they're the ones that suffer. That's really kind of interesting. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. "What have you done to me?" he said. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife." You know. Sounds like a Rodney Dangerfield. "Here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way, he and his wife and everything he had. So he left wealthier than he arrived, with his life and his wife intact, even though he had brought diseases and I'm sure death into Egypt, because he had lied to the Pharaoh. So it's a strange little event that happened, and how it happened and why it happened, and the fact that it's even recorded for us to see is very interesting. Get a pretty good look at Abram when the pressure's on. You know, it's easy to be faithful when everything's good. You know, if you look at pre-pandemic, boy, you know, we had things that we complained about, right? But it didn't seem like it was that big a deal at the time. And it was easy to have faith then, right? Now that we're in it, people have lost their jobs or lost a loved one, certainly lost part of their wealth. You know, this is the time that we have to remain faithful and to know that God's in control, and that everything's going to come to good through God for believers, and that's what we are. So there's nothing to be concerned about. So easy to say, but that's what it's really all about, is putting your faith to work for you. It's not just about reading ink on paper and then closing the book and going your way. It's about internalizing these things and these messages so that you can actually live them and benefit from it. And you will benefit from it. I can tell you that. All right, we've got a few minutes left, not much, but I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 13 real quick. Abram and Lot separate. So Abram went up to Egypt, to the Negev, with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and silver and gold. And God doesn't look upon wealth as an evil thing. You know, David was wealthy. Solomon was extremely wealthy. But it's when you worship the wealth rather than God that it becomes an idol. If you use your wealth to the glory of God, it's a blessing to you and to those around you. So it's not that wealth in itself is evil. Money isn't the root of all evil. It's when you worship it, it becomes the root of all evil. Money in itself is not evil. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to a place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. That's based on water. So in this particular time, and certainly even today, you got to be able to water your flocks. You got to be able to feed your flocks. The flocks for them at that time was their wealth, and they were so large that they were fighting over the rights to both. So they had to separate. And quarreling arose between Abram's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Lot. The Canaanites and the Pezerites were also living in the land. So it's pretty crowded. We're getting crowded here. So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen or mine, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. So Abram, instead of talking behind Lot's back, right, he goes right to him. And he says, hey, brother, we got a problem. Let's work something out so that we're not constantly at each other's throat, and everything will work out because God's in control. So Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan as well, watered like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt toward Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, set out toward the east. So Lot took the best lot. He took the richest. He took the valley with the water and the trees and the lush vegetation. And he took the best. And Abram had no problem with that. The two men parted company, and Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tent near Sodom. We know what's going to happen now. Now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. This is, again, a reestablishment of that covenant that follows all the way through until today, with Israel being established in the Middle East. God gave them that land. So Abraham moved his tents and went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron. Hey, look, I'm just reading. Mamre. What's that? Listen, I didn't make that up, okay? That's the real deal. So Mamre, that's what it says. You wicked women, where he built an altar to the Lord. Forgive me. Yeah, I'm over time and I'm thankful for it. So we'll stop there. So it is remarkable how God works through us, and if we're trying to attach what we see from so many thousands of years ago to what's happening even with ourselves today, it's easily done. I mean, here we have a real opportunity today, right now, to live our faith out, right? To call upon God. Are you going to be anxious? Are you going to have doubts? Are you going to have fear and anxiety? Hey, I guarantee it. It's going to happen. These are uncertain times, But if you look throughout history, do you know the time that hasn't been uncertain? I think it just depends on the scale of that uncertainty. And certainly this particular time, it's huge. How do you deal with it? What do? You get on your knees and you talk to God and you express your fear and your anxiety. He knows that we're all going through this. He's with us as we go through this, and he will establish himself within us to others as our faith allows, meaning this is the time to shine. This is the time to be gracious to your neighbor, to love your neighbor as yourself, to love your God first and foremost, but to love your neighbor as yourself, to reach out. I'm not suggesting that we gather or we come out of quarantine or we do anything that is not logical for us to do, but pick up the phone and call somebody you haven't talked to for a while. This technology is really cool. It's something that we were given just specifically for a time like this. So utilize it, reach out to those. And trust me, not just to those you love. But the ones that's been giving you the hard time, maybe reach out to see how they're doing, you know? That's what we're supposed to be doing during this time. Stay faithful, trust, talk to him often, read his word, ground yourself so that you're not overcome by the circumstances of the world around us. So let's close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, again, thank you so much for your word. It's such an encouragement to see that over time, from the beginning of creation until now, and I'm sure until the end of time, not much really has changed with us. You know, we still have those basic fears and basic concerns and that sinful nature. But you have given us another path, and that path is your will and your word through Jesus Christ, your Son, who died for us so that we may live and have a relationship with you. And that is the most powerful, wonderful, good news that could ever be, ever. And I thank you for it, Father. I pray that you will touch each one of our hearts tonight. I pray that you will stay close to us for those that are suffering. I pray for relief, and I pray for an uplifting, Father, and I pray that you will bring us all back together next week. Pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Good night, guys. Any questions or anything, Carolyn?
No, that was it. No.
Everybody's asleep. All right, I'm going to try to turn this off. I have no idea.
I don't either.
Okay,
Except where it says end stream.
that'll do it.
Okay.
All right.
Are
So
you
yeah, I was a little nervous.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
I bet you did great.
thank you.